What's up, everybody? Welcome to another beautiful RC episode. Today I am bringing you a side-by-side comparison versus a Nitro and an electric RC car. There's a lot to cover today. I want to make sure you understand everything. If you're first getting into RC, I want you to understand which one you want. Which one do you like? And do you know everything before you jump headfirst into Nitro, headfirst into electric?
I said I'll take it.
This is going to help pros, this is going to help rookies, and it's going to help everybody in between understand the full comparison side by side of Nitro and electric RC cars. Let's dive right in. Guys, thank you so much for joining me. Today we're going to dive into this topic here. I've been wanting to make this video for a long time. I now have one of each car. This is a Losi Elite X Nitro buggy, and this is a Losi Elite XE electric buggy. These are the same chassis, the same model. They're identical minus their power plant. Now, as you can see, I have a bunch of different stuff on my desk here. I have two cars, I have some fuel, I got a fuel gun, a starter box, I have a charger, some batteries. What all is this for? What all does it mean? Some of you may know, some of you may not, and that's perfectly fine. First off, we're going to start with how these cars are controlled. At the end of the day, they are different, but they are similar. Both of these vehicles are controlled by a remote control and a receiver. This is a 2.4 gigahertz radio. In front of me, this is specifically a Futaba 7PX. I've painted it so it looks a little different, but this is the controller for the car. These are going to be controlled identically. There's many controllers on the market. You can have any one to your liking and any one to your preference. This is just the one I have, but they're all going to control identically. Some have more features, some are like a Cadillac, some are like a Honda, some are just a little more luxury than others. Depending on your liking, pick a radio that works for you that you like. Now that we know they're both controlled identically and there's nothing special about how you control a Nitro car or an electric car, let's dive into the first difference with these two vehicles, the power source. In front of me, you can see I have the Nitro buggy. This has a 0.21 nitromethane engine sticking out the top of it. It has an exhaust pipe, an air filter, and a fuel tank. This buggy is controlled by this mechanical motor that runs off fuel and has to have a starter box for it. The engines are offered in different sizes depending on the vehicle the engine is strapped to. This happens to be a 0.21 engine. There are multiple sizes out there depending on what vehicle this motor goes in. That fuel consists of a mix of methanol, nitromethane, and oil. This is not like a typical vehicle that would have an oil pan or oil built into it. It's more of like a weed eater or a leaf blower where the oil is mixed into it, or like a two-stroke dirt. With this fuel, this goes in the car, it goes through a fuel tank, it can go through a fuel bottle or a fuel gun like I have right here. Simply pull up this lid, push the gun right here, pull the trigger, and it'll fill the fuel tank full of fuel. There's also several other ways to do that. It just happens to be the fastest way that can get you in and out of a pit stop in a race quickest. Engines consist of what you think a typical engine would consist. We have an engine block, we have a piston, we have a crankshaft, we have a full exhaust pipe with a manifold, we have a carburetor with a intake air filter, and all the typical things. A typical car, you would have a spark plug. This is more going to be like a diesel engine where it has a glow plug. It's going to take a simple glow igniter that would go to the top of the engine, ignite this glow plug and glow it red, and that way when the fuel goes through and you're spinning the motor, it ignites that combustion and starts the working of the motor. That's where this comes into play with this is a starter box. Now with this box, you could also have a roto start. You could have a pull start, or you could have like the Traxxas easy starts. There's multiple ways to start these engines. It just all depends on what vehicle you have and how you go about it. Most of the racing platforms, like the buggies I'm holding in front of me, are going to utilize a starter box just for ease of convenience. It takes less weight off the vehicle, having a starter or something attached to the motor. It makes everything more efficient for racing. We have our favorite helper, Mr. Diesel. What are you doing? Were you sleeping? In front of me, I have the e-buggy. This buggy is going to be a lot more simple than the Nitro car. There's a little less working components, and it's just a lot simpler to understand and go about. For starters, our motor or our power that's going to be supplying the power to this chassis is going to be an electronic motor. These are brushed or brushless engines. They can result in different sizes 540, 550 can size, and they can also result in a different KV, resulting in almost like high as the RPM can go. You could have more torque or you could have more speed depending on what KV rating you require for your engine. There's also going to be an ESC or electronic speed controller. This is kind of going to be the brains of this operation. It's going to connect back and forth to your receiver, to your radio, and take the inputs and apply the amount of throttle or the amount of braking to your motor to help control your vehicle. Whereas the Nitro car is going to utilize a servo, just like a steering servo, to help control that throttle linkage and move that back and forth. It's not going to have a clutch system. This is just going to have a pinion gear that connects straight to the gearbox to give you instant power delivery, so there's no lag, there's nothing to spin up or anything to go about like that. With that being said, these are a lot simpler cars. It does not mean they're any less performers, it does not mean there's any more or less fun. These are just preferences and what you like and what you don't. These, you simply plug a battery up to this thing, hit the track, hit the yard, or do whatever you like to do with electric vehicles. That's the beauty of these. And what powers this versus a fuel like the nitromethane that we're using to power the Nitro buggy is going to be a battery. These can consist of a Lipo battery or a lithium polymer battery such as a LiHV. It has a little bit higher voltage and a better discharge rating than the Lipos. Used to be some nickel metal and some NiCads, and those kind of faded out with time due to their heaviness and just their amount of range wasn't that good. They didn't last that long. Now, as you can see here, we have a giant variation between 1S all the way up to a 4S battery. Not only do these batteries range in size, they also range in performance and longevity. Some of these have an extended milliamp capacity that will last longer, and some of them are smaller to fit in various areas. Now, on the topic of electric vehicles, I do want to bring up one bad thing about the electric vehicles. Now, as you can see, I have two Lipo sacks here. These are fireproof sacks that help contain a battery if it was to result in a fire or something during charging. These are supposed to be fire resistant material that help prevent any fire from your home or where you're charging your batteries at. So with this being said, one of the disadvantages you may experience with a Lipo battery is it swelling. You can see this battery right here. It has a little bit of age on it, not too much, but it has swollen. This is a hard case battery. They also come in soft packs. Very nice, expensive battery from QCRC, good brand. Nothing wrong with the brand, just happened to be a little old and had some age on it, and it ended up swelling. Now, the disadvantage with this is, one, this is really not safe. We need to go dispose of this at a proper facility. That's why it's in this bag. And with that, you can have a lot of issues. There can be severe fires. It can damage your car. It can damage the surface that you're laying it on, a table, your home. They could cause a lot of problems. Now, it is very rare. Lipo fires, battery fires in general, RC cars are rare. It depends if you're charging them properly, as long as you have the right wire, you're discharging them properly, and everything is set up the way they're supposed to be. You should not have any issues. There are some rare cases. You just need to take caution and be aware of these issues. That is the one downside of electric vehicles that a Nitro car doesn't. Now, the only downside here is going to be the Nitro car to kind of offset the battery issue is these are hot. If you lay your hand on this engine, these run up to 270 degrees sometimes. If they're running really hot, an average is like 200 degrees. They can be really hot and burn your hands. You have to be careful when picking up a Nitro vehicle as well. It's just kind of one of the two disadvantages to each car. They each have their own benefits and each have their own warnings that you need to take care of. Long. Lipo technology has come a lot of way, especially with the Tesla cars in today's society right now. These are lightweight batteries. They do look a little big because you have multiple cells laying in here, but this is ultimately going to be what powers the car. C rating, which is kind of going to be like your burst rating. If you want to say, for lack of a better term, I like to consider this like a turbo car. So depending on the C rating of your battery, it's kind of like how much boost pressure you'd be running. I like to give that example because it kind of relates to like how a normal car would relate. If you up the boost pressure on a car, you're going to have more power. If you up the C rating on your battery, you're going to have more power. While it may still be a 6,000 battery, you may still have a 20-gallon fuel tank for that turbocharged engine, but you still are going to have different power ratings depending on how much boost that turbocharger is pushing. I kind of like to think that same way with the C rating on batteries. With these batteries, you got to have somewhere to charge them. That's where a charger comes in like this. You can get a charger that charges 2 batteries at once, 4 batteries at once, or you can get a charger that charges 1 battery. There's different cells in these batteries, and that's what this big plug is for, and you're going to have to balance these cells and ensure they maintain over time. Now, even though Nitro cars do not have a battery to run them, they have a battery to control them. There's going to be a tiny battery inside of the receiver box of the vehicle that helps give power to the receiver to connect to the radio and power your servos that are going to let you control the car. Now that we understand what powers these two cars and how those are so different, we also have to understand how they deliver power. This is a nitro engine, so it does not use a transmission. Some nitro cars, like some on-road cars, can use a transmission where it has a servo that shifts it into a higher gear, like a normal car you would see, which would incorporate a transmission. These nitro buggies right here do not. They connect through a clutch system that connects to a single gear that powers the front drivetrain and the rear drivetrain to make them four-wheel drive. There's also some that are just two-wheel drive and some that are front-wheel drive. Depends on the vehicle you have. But ideally, these all use a clutch system. They're going to use a flywheel and a clutch that connect to that engine crankshaft and help power the whole vehicle. These clutches are going to be on a spring and they're going to sling out with higher RPM. That's why you kind of hear people revving the car a lot and making sure that those clutches stay engaged so they have constant power coming through corners, coming off of jumps, and landing in certain areas. Keep those clutches engaged and spun to the top of that flywheel to make sure you have power versus letting it kind of spool up like you would as a turbo as well. Those clutches have to sling out and grab that outer flywheel to then provide the power to your gearbox and then ultimately to your wheels and to the ground. However, to an electric vehicle, there's nothing. Motor connected to one single pinion gear, connected to that gearbox, connected to the drive shafts, to the outside, to the tires, and to the ground, giving you solid, smooth, consistent torque and acceleration. Now with the power delivery system, like we talked about, there's different sizes of nitro engines. There's also different oil and nitro content fuels to help you have more power. There's tunability in this through a bunch of different screws, high speed, low speed needles, idle needles, and so on and so forth. With electric engines, there is different sizes and kV ratings. A nitro engine can spin anywhere from 25,000 all the way to 37,000 RPM, depending on the size and the way the vehicle is set up. That is absolutely insane. If you think about, you look in your car, it normally goes to 7,000, maybe 9,000, depending on what kind of vehicle you have in real life. That's crazy to think. Just beginning, these are 25,000 to 37,000 RPM. That is insane, boys. That's also why these things sound so freaking cool, because they rev incredibly high. Electric engines can range anywhere from 10,000 to 50,000 RPMs. They start a little lower and they go so much higher. These things spin at a crazy amount of speed. To figure out exactly what RPM your electric engine is pushing, you need to take the kV rating of your engine, which mine is 2050. You need to take the voltage that you're putting towards the engine of your battery, which mine is 14.8 volt, and that'll give you the ultimate RPM of your engine. Now that we've been under the hood, we understand the power system, the power delivery, and about how these cars work in a general basis, we're going to dive into performance. Do they perform differently? Do they perform the same? Is one better than the other? These cars are built at such a high level and standard to ensure that them and their components withstand track abuse, outside basting abuse, or whatever you guys want to throw at them, that they're almost going to perform identically. There are a few pros and cons here that we're going to go over right now. Starting with a nitro car, first con is going to be the clutches. While that is great to get power to the ground, there's also a delay there. So you're not going to have that instant power. You're going to have to gradually build up that power until you reach that RPM when the clutches are fully sprung out and grab that flywheel to give you all the power that you have offered in your engine. So that's why you hear people revving them up and keeping them at higher RPM ranges to make sure those clutches stay engaged. You also have fuel. Fuel is going to be a con here because you have to fuel this thing up. That could affect your performance. You may not have a longer run time. You may have to worry about fueling it up. Or if you fuel it up correctly, you could have a flame out if there has to get air in it while you're fueling the vehicle up, because these are going to run off pressure once the system is closed and ensure that fuel is getting to the engine adequately, because there's no fuel pump here. It's all mechanical. Also for performance, if you're running in a very dusty or kind of muddy conditions, whatever you have where you're located, or your track, or your yard, or just your playground you're using these on, they're air filters. These are going to have to stay super clean. That's the only thing separating outside debris getting into this motor, and ultimately could possibly ruin it and end your racing. Diving into cons of the electric car. The cons of the electric car are going to be ultimately your battery. That's kind of really the only con we're going to have here. Batteries don't have that long of runtime. The higher milliamp batteries are going to cost more money. They're going to take longer to charge. Whereas this thing, you do have a receiver pack, but it doesn't take the long charge. They range anywhere from around 1200 to all the way up to, like, I've seen 2350, I think, milliamp batteries that go in the receiver pack, and you could sometimes last all day on those. So you could run this thing back to back to back to back, as long as making sure the engine isn't getting too hot, your air filter's clean, and everything there is good, tires are good. You can ultimately run this thing for hours at a time, depending on how long that receiver battery lasts. Whereas with an electric car, the whole entire vehicle is running off this single battery pack. So you got to let this thing last. It's got to power everything, depending on how much you're on the throttle, how hot it is outside, how much weight the car is. If it's got some mud on it, you're spinning the tires. There's a lot of variables here that go for that, as well as fuel mileage on the Nitro car. Other than that, that's kind of the only con I can think of with the electric car. I know it's kind of seeming like, oh, Nitro is a lot to do. It is a lot to do, but it's so rewarding. The sound, the smell, just the enjoyment of it. It gives you such reward doing this. Well, I'm not saying the electric isn't rewarding, but there's just a lot less components here to just kind of like hop in and go. So you don't have that like, oh, I worked really hard to get here. You're just like, plug battery in, cut the switch on, go drive the car. It's really like, you didn't really work up for nothing. And some people, that's why they love electric, as well as some people, that's why they don't really care for electric. I kind of like both. I like having the Nitro. Sometimes the Nitro gets finicky. I get a little kind of upset at it, a little aggravated at times. I jump back to the electric. It makes it easy, and I jump back to the Nitro because I miss that sound, that smell, and just I love it. Now that we understand the performance capabilities of these vehicles almost being identical, let's dive into what they require maintenance. These are going to be maintenance cars. Now, some vehicles may not require as much maintenance as you have like a monster truck. You have a Slash. You kind of have these are high-performance racing buggies that do races. So there's going to be different maintenance items on each vehicle. You have to research your own vehicle and figure out what maintenance those vehicles require. But generally, this is going to be rule of thumb maintenance for Nitro and electric vehicles. Not really catering to the buggies here, kind of catering to any vehicle. Just some may have to be done more fluently than others. Starting with the Nitro maintenance, we're going to have air filters, number one. We're going to have fuel. We have fuel line. We got fuel filters. We also have a glow plug we have to maintain in here. We have our clutches that are going to wear out over time. We have to maintain. We have brake rotors and brake pads like a real vehicle. We're going to have to maintain and check. Now, just because we have to maintain it does not mean you go drive the car 10 minutes, you got to tear the whole thing down and do it. I'm not saying that at all. You definitely don't have to do that. If there's dusty conditions, if anything, you'll have to change this air filter maybe every run or every couple runs. That's really the only thing you have to do. And sometimes the inside air filter, A-okay, good to go. But after time, after a few runs, maybe 5 runs, depending on what your vehicle is, there's a lot of variables here. I can't tell you exactly what means you're going to have to maintenance more or less, but those are those items you're going to have to look out for on a Nitro vehicle to maintain and keep it running at its peak performance. Whereas on an electric vehicle, the only thing you're going to have to worry about maintaining is really just keeping the vehicle clean. Checking your gear mesh right here on the 2 gears, because you're going to be metal to metal like you are on the Nitro car, but this is more instant torque, so it's going to be a little more aggressive on the gearing. You're going to have to check that. There's a bearing and a magnet inside this electric motor. You may have to take this off periodically, spin it, make sure it doesn't sound gritty, make sure it sounds really good, make sure that's free to spin, doesn't have any resistance behind it. If so, you may have to send it into the manufacturer that built your engine, have them maintain it, or maybe you have the ability to maintain the thing at your home. That's awesome. With the ESC and some motors, there's fans. You have to worry about the fan. That's kind of it. Then you're just going to have your normal maintenance on both of them that follow for each one. You're going to have differentials in here of oil. We went over that in my maintenance videos. If you want to check that out, the link will be in the description below, or click the link right here. You're going to have shocks as well. So each of them do have their own specific maintenance, but they also both have their general maintenance you're going to have to look out for. There's a lot of moving parts on these guys, whether it's the monster truck or it's these race buggies like I have in front of me. All right, now we're getting into the nitty gritty. We're getting into it right here. We're getting into the ultimate question I keep getting. Quade, well, what is the running cost of these things? I know you've listed a ton of stuff here. You listed a ton of stuff here. Like, can I afford this? Is this something I want to get into? How much monetary involvement is this going to require of me? Well, I'm glad you asked that, because that's a big consideration to think about when you go into this. Starting with Nitro here, we're going to start with our number one concern we have is fuel. Without fuel, this vehicle does not run. Now, this VP fuel in front of me is averaging right now, depending on where you get it from, anywhere from $39 to $49 a gallon. That is absolutely insane. I know it sounds crazy. Now, that can get you a long time with this. You could maybe have that fuel last you a year. Then it could absorb moisture and all that stuff, so you have to take in those variables as well. Also, it's very variable depending on your climate, how much you use the stuff. They also sell fuel in quarts, and you're able to pick that up at your local store and kind of see what you want. Next, after fuel, we're going to dive into air filters. It's going to be our second big maintenance item on a Nitro vehicle. These air filters have to stay clean. These motors have to breathe. Next, we're going to have glow plugs. They're going to be our third biggest wear item. The glow plugs in the top of the engine are what helps ignite the fuel and start that combustion process in the engine to make it work properly. You're going to have to change those out not too often, but kind of some often. I usually change mine probably once a weekend. I know that maybe sounds kind of crazy, but I just want to make sure the car doesn't flame out. I don't have any issues. While talking in this price range aspect and what the running costs are for each of these, please also take into consideration I'm on the East Coast. I'm in South Carolina, so prices here can vary from prices in California, New York, Ohio, Florida, Prices are going to kind of vary everywhere. This is just what the running cost is around my area on the East Coast right now in South Carolina. Next on maintenance for a nitro car, we're going to have our clutches and our brakes. Clutch shoes, you can get carbon, you can get nylon, you can get aluminum, you can get steel, you can get any kind of clutch, and then that flywheel they sling out to and grip. Those are going to be two wear items you have to look out for. Now those you may have to replace once a year. You may, if you don't drive your car a lot, not every weekend, you can replace those things maybe every 2 years. Depends how, if you keep them clean, if dirt gets in there and messes them up. It's all variables here, but you can maybe last a long time without having to replace your clutches. You have your brakes. We have rotors and pads. Brakes vary depending on the manufacturer and the size of your vehicle as well. Diving into our electric running cost. The only running cost you're going to have is a battery charger. There's nothing else really specific to an electric that you're going to have that you wouldn't have on a nitro. You're going to have your running cost of your battery charging, whatever it costs your power bill. Maybe you have to get a generator if you go to races, kind of where you're at charging your vehicle. If you go to some bash spots, crawler locations, it's really only running cost with these is charging. Now that we went through all of our topics here for these two vehicles, I wanted to dive into the similarities. While yes, these vehicles are very different in how they power themselves, how they supply that power, how they maintain power, and how they run ultimately just to get them started and up and running down the road, they're still very similar. If I took the engine, the fuel tank, the exhaust, and the air filter off of this buggy, took these motors out of here, looked at them head on, they would look identical. The shocks are exactly the same. The A-arms are the same. All of these turnbuckles, trailing arms, everything is exactly the same. In fact, to go a step farther, here's all the maintenance parts I keep on hand for my buggy and Caitlin's buggy. We're going to a race. All of these parts are exactly interchangeable between each vehicle. Bodies are going to be a little different, but they're also similar. This body right here, if you can see and zoom in, it has a cutout where I'm supposed to cut this out for the fuel door and for the engine. This one fits on Caitlin's car. No issue whatsoever without that stuff cut out. This one has the stuff cut out and fits on my car perfectly. I could cut this body out and put it on my car. I could have not cut this body out and put it on Caitlin's car. So they're very similar in a lot of ways. The chassis underneath is exactly the same. Same chassis. The only thing we're using differently is a different center diff and a different motor mount system. The nitro car is going to have a servo to control that throttle versus where the electronic motor is just going to use that ESC to control that, where this doesn't have ESC. This also doesn't have a receiver battery because we're using a giant battery to control the whole vehicle. These are both going to have receiver packs we talked in the beginning, and if you race them, they're both going to use transponders. So in a lot of ways, they are different, but they're also very similar. Boys, that's going to wrap this up. That is everything you need to know about the differences between a nitro vehicle and an electric RC vehicle. They're very different, but they're also very similar at the end of the day when you take all of their power supply off and just look at the general chassis and all of their suspension and components. I really hope this helped you guys understand the difference, understand which ones you want. And I really want to preface here, I know there may be a lot of components and a lot of requirements it takes to have a nitro vehicle, but I don't want that to scare you away from these vehicles. They are so fun and rewarding once they're up and running and they're going down the track or they're going through a yard, through a field, gravel, whichever you have. They are phenomenal vehicles, and the sound, the smell, and just the excitement of having that nitro engine, it's just incredible. It just fills your body with joy. At least it does for me, and I know a ton of other people. It's just something about nitro that you can't get away from once you get into it. Now, some people, if you go to the track by yourself, nitros may not be for you. If you go to a bash spot by yourself, nitros may be for you. As far as the electric goes, there's also something to be said about that instant power you get and that instant reward of pulling that throttle, and that car instantly takes off. There's something to be said about the simplicity of that. It's beautiful. Plug a battery in here, hit the button, set the car on the ground, and drive it, no matter where you're at. There's also the benefit of these being waterproof. That's also something I forgot to mention. Some of these guys right here can be completely waterproof, whereas the nitro car, you get water in this air filter, buddy, it's going to be a bad day. You have to find what works for you and what you like better. And if you're like me and you don't have a personal preference and you're like, dude, this is really cool, I like this one. Dude, this one's also cool, I like this one. Buy both. There's nothing wrong with that. Buy whatever you guys like. There's no right or there's no wrong to this. I don't want this to scare you away from nitro cars. I'm not saying that at all. And I don't want to scare you away from electric, saying they're not fun and rewarding to drive because they don't have the sound and the smell. These still make an incredible sound going down a track or flying down a road. Boys, thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. It brought you a ton of value and entertainment. Drop me a comment down below. Let me know. Did I miss anything? What are your guys' take on this? Let me know. Drop a poll down below. Nitro or electric or both? Which ones do you guys and gals decide you like? My wife personally loves the Nitro, but she says it's a little too much for her to try to do by herself. She really likes watching them. She really likes hearing the sound, and she pits me. She loves doing the pitting for me, but as far as driving the car, it's just a little much for her, and she doesn't enjoy it as much as the driving, but she loves watching them. That's where the electric car fits for her. Find out what you like. Get your wife involved. If she, she's kind of like, hey, I kind of like the Nitro car, and you like an electric, go for it, guys. Get your family, get your friends involved. That's what this is all about. This hobby is to bring all of us together and hang out with some awesome people and drive some really cool cars and escape reality for a little bit. At the end of the day, I love this. I wouldn't trade it for the world. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope you loved it. Drop a big like button, hit the subscribe, and if you're feeling a little bit frisky, hit that notification bell to not miss any updates or any info like this and little guides and step-by-steps and just insights into the RC industry and the RC hobby as a whole. Thank you so much for this video. I love you guys so much. I can't wait to show you what's coming up with the track. Be sure to check that Google link down below. Sign up for our racing event. Get your first access to our track when you sign up at the link below. I love you guys. Hope you have a beautiful day, morning, night, afternoon, whenever, and however you're watching this video. Hope you're having an awesome time. We're also being affected by the hurricane right now. Even though we're in South Carolina at the top of it, we still have some flooding here. It's been kind of significant in our area where we're at and kind of the country. So hope you guys are safe out there. I hope everything's going good with you guys. If you're affected by the hurricane, I'm praying for you and your family. I wish you guys the best of success. I hope you can get everything together and not be affected too bad by the storm. So love you guys. I'll see you later. Have a great one.